My name is Thomas Ashford. I have served as a royal guard for 14 years. Most of those years have been spent in places no camera has ever filmed and no visitor has ever walked. The Records Corridor at Windsor is one of those places. It runs along the lower east wing, lit by old lamps that flicker if you close a door too hard, and it smells always of two things: old paper and lemon polish. I tell you about the smell first, because the smell is how the story begins. It was a Tuesday in late autumn. The shift had been quiet. I was filing the night's summary reports, the routine kind, the kind nobody reads twice. A guard at my post does this every night. You stack them, you log them, you slide them into the cabinet, you sign the corner of the duty book, and you move on. I had done it 1,000 times. I could do it with my eyes half closed and my mind half elsewhere. But that night, something on the third report made my hand stop. It was a small thing, a line near the top of the page, where the originating department is printed. Every report is generated by a specific office. Personal protection writes their own. Estate security writes their own. Communications writes their own. You learn, after 14 years, which department writes what. You learn the rhythm of the paperwork the same way a postman learns the rhythm of a street. This report was a summary of a private visit by Princess Catherine to a children's hospice in the Midlands, routine in every way. 3 pages, nothing unusual in the content. But the department name at the top was wrong. It said the report had been generated by internal audit. Internal audit does not write protection summaries. Internal audit writes financial reviews and procedural checks. They have never, in 14 years, written a single line about a royal visit. It would be like a dentist filing a weather report. I read the line 3 times. I told myself I was tired. I told myself someone in the typing pool had pulled the wrong header. These things happen. People are people. But I held the page a moment longer than I should have, and then I put it in the cabinet, signed the duty book, and went home. I didn't sleep well. I kept seeing the line. The next night I came in early. I told the man on the previous shift I wanted to get a head start on the filing. He shrugged and left. He was a good man, name of Peter Holloway. He didn't ask questions. Most of us don't. I went to the cabinet where I'd filed the report the night before. I read it again. The header still said internal audit. I had not imagined it. Then I did something I had never done in 14 years of service. I opened the cabinet drawer for the previous month and I started looking. I wasn't searching for anything specific. I was just looking. I told myself it was curiosity. I told myself I was checking my own work. But I knew even then that I was looking for the same line on another page. It took me about 40 minutes to find it. A report from 3 weeks earlier. A summary of a private meeting between Princess Catherine and a charity director at Kensington Palace. Department of Origin printed at the top. Internal audit. I sat down on the small wooden stool by the cabinet, and I did not move for some time. 2 could be a mistake. 2 was still inside the world of human error. A clerk could have made the same wrong click twice. A header template could have been miscoded. There were a dozen innocent ways for 2 pages to carry the same wrong name. But I knew, sitting on that stool with the smell of lemon polish thick around me, that I was going to keep looking. I kept looking for 11 nights. I did not change my shift. I did not ask any questions of any colleague. I did not raise it with my supervisor. I simply came in, did my work, and on the slow stretches between 2 and 4 in the morning, when the corridor was empty and the castle was asleep above me, I opened older drawers and I read. I found 4 more. 6 reports in total, all of them concerning Princess Catherine, all of them generated according to the header line by internal audit. Some were summaries of private visits. One was a scheduling brief. One was a security assessment of a garden event at Anmer Hall. They spanned 8 months. I sat with that number for a long time. 8 months. 8 months is not a clerical error. 8 months is a pattern, and a pattern in our line of work is a decision somebody made. I started a notebook. A small black one I bought at a stationer's near my flat. I did not bring it into the castle. I kept it at home in a drawer beneath my socks, and every morning when I came off shift, I would write down what I had seen that night. The date of the report, the subject of the report, the signature at the bottom. The signatures, I noticed, were not all the same. They came from various junior officers across various departments. Some signatures I knew. Some I didn't. None of them were from internal audit, even though internal audit was supposedly the originating office. That detail bothered me more than anything else, because it meant the reports weren't being written by the people whose names appeared at the bottom. The names at the bottom were borrowed. Someone was generating these documents and then dressing them in other people's signatures in another department's header and slipping them into the file as if they had always belonged there. I learned every name on every signature line. I memorized them the way I had once memorized the faces of visiting dignitaries: Henry Pell, Margaret Atwood, James Coombe, David Riley, Sarah Quinn. None of them, I was fairly certain, knew their names were appearing on documents they had not written, but I needed to be sure. So one slow afternoon, on a different errand entirely, I walked past Henry Pell at the staff canteen, and I said very casually, "How's internal audit treating you these days, Henry?" He looked at me as if I'd asked him about the surface of the moon. "I've never worked internal audit, Tom. I'm personal protection." "Always have been," I smiled. I said I must have been thinking of someone else. I drank my tea. I went back to my post. That was the night I knew I was not looking at a clerical mistake. I was looking at a man. I just didn't know which one yet. The first time Hugh Bramwell spoke to me, he did it in the corridor outside the records vault around 1:30 in the morning. I had been there for almost 3 weeks of quiet searching by then. The notebook at home had grown to 9 pages. I was carrying a stack of routine files from one cabinet to another when I heard footsteps behind me, not the heavy step of another guard, a lighter step. A man in soft shoes. "Late again, Ashford?" I turned. Director Bramwell was standing about 6 feet behind me, in a grey suit, no tie, his hands in his pockets. He smiled the way administrative men smile when they want you to think nothing of their presence, polite, empty, unhurried. "Just finishing up, sir," I said. "You finish up a great deal lately, don't you?" I did not answer that. I held the file steady against my chest. "I notice things," he said. "It's the job." I nodded once, he nodded back. He turned and walked away down the corridor slowly, like a man who had nothing to do and all night to do it in. I stood in the corridor for nearly a minute after he was gone. The lamps flickered. The smell of polish was sharper than I had ever known it, almost stinging. I went home that morning, and I wrote in the notebook, in slightly shakier handwriting than usual, "Bramwell, 1:30 a.m. Records Corridor." He knew I had been there. I had not, until that moment, considered Hugh Bramwell at all. Bramwell was a director. He was the senior administrative officer who oversaw the entire records wing. He did not write reports, he approved them. He did not file, he delegated. He was the kind of man who walked through our corridor twice a year at most, usually with a clipboard and a polite nod, and otherwise existed entirely in offices above us, where the carpets were thicker and the lamps did not flicker. I had assumed the guilty party would be someone small, a junior clerk, a typing pool assistant, a disgruntled archivist, someone who needed money and had been approached by someone outside the walls. That was the shape of the story I had been telling myself. I had not, until that night in the corridor, imagined the story might be shaped differently, that it might be coming from above me, not below. I told myself I was being paranoid. A senior man speaks to a junior man in a corridor at 1:30 in the morning. It happens. He is the director. He has the right to walk anywhere in his own wing. It meant nothing, but the next night he was there again, and the night after he did not always speak. Sometimes he just walked past, slowly, with his hands in his pockets, the same soft step, the same vague nod. Sometimes he stopped at a cabinet, opened a drawer, looked at a file, closed it again, and walked on. He was watching me, and I was, by then, watching him. For 2 weeks, we performed the same quiet dance. I worked my shift, I filed my reports, I did not open old cabinets in front of him. I did not bring the notebook anywhere near the castle. I did my duties exactly as a guard with no curiosity would do them. I let him see a man with nothing to hide. He, in turn, performed the role of a director who simply happened to be working late. Neither of us said the thing we both knew. That was the agreement. That was the dance. In that fortnight, I came to understand him better than I had expected. He arrived at the corridor most nights around 1. He stayed until about 3. He never carried files out. He never carried anything in. He simply walked, looked, and left. And then on the 17th night of our quiet dance, he made a mistake. I had finished my filing early and stepped into the small alcove at the far end of the corridor to fix the strap on my boot. The alcove is barely an alcove. It's a recessed doorway leading to a service stair almost nobody uses. From inside it, you cannot be seen from the main corridor unless you step out. I heard him pass, the soft step. I did not move. Then I heard a sound I had not heard before in 3 weeks of watching him. The sound of the archive vault door being unlocked. The archive vault is at the end of our corridor. It holds the sealed files, the truly sensitive material, private schedules, medical notes, family correspondence, the kind of paperwork that does not exist on any computer and never will. The vault is unlocked twice a week, in the daytime by 2 officers together. It is never, under any circumstance, unlocked at night by one man alone. I held very still. The vault door opened. It closed again softly from the inside. I stayed in the alcove for a full minute. Then I stepped out. The corridor was empty. The vault door was shut. From outside, you would never have known anyone was in there. I walked to the door. I put my ear against it for 2 seconds. I heard the faint, unmistakable click of a camera shutter. The kind of small click a phone makes when it photographs a page. Then another. Then another. I stepped back. I did not knock. I did not call out. I did not draw my weapon. I did not radio for backup. I walked, very calmly, back down the corridor to my post. I sat down at the duty desk. I picked up my pen, and I wrote in the duty log the most ordinary line I had ever written in 14 years. 0214. Routine patrol. All quiet. Then, in my own private notebook back at the flat, the next morning, I wrote a different line. Vault open at 2:14 a.m. Bramwell inside, photographing a sealed file. I did not enter. I did not confront. I returned to post, because I understood, sitting at that desk with my heart steady and my hand still, that confronting him would have ended it in his favor. He was a director. I was a guard. He would have walked out of that vault with a story already prepared. He would have said he was conducting an authorized audit. He would have said I had misread the situation. He would have, by morning, opened a file on me, Thomas Ashford, the junior officer with a grudge, the one who had been seen in the records corridor at strange hours for weeks, the one who had been making unauthorized checks of old cabinets. He would have made me the story, so I did not confront him. I let him finish. I let him close the vault. I let him walk out, past the corridor, past my post, and into the rest of his quiet night, and the next morning, I began to make my copies. I did it slowly. I did it over 4 nights. The 6 misfilled reports I had originally found, the duty logs from every night Bramwell had appeared in the corridor. The original entry forms for the vault, which showed that no audit had been authorized on any of those dates. The signature lists from the various departments whose names had been borrowed. I photocopied every page on the old machine in the small staff room down the hall, the one nobody uses anymore because the newer offices have better ones. I copied each page twice. I kept one set at home, under the socks, beside the notebook. The other set I sealed in a plain brown envelope. On the 5th morning, before my shift ended, I walked the envelope upstairs. I did not take it to my direct supervisor. My direct supervisor reported to Bramwell. The whole chain of command in the records wing ran upward through that one man, which I understood now was not an accident either. He had built the chain. He sat at the top of it. Any complaint about him would have to pass through him. So I went around him. I walked, instead, to the office of the master of the household. I did not have an appointment. I told the aide at the front desk that I needed 5 minutes, that it was a matter of security, and that I would wait outside the door for as long as it took. I waited 4 hours. At some point in the late morning, a quiet man in a dark suit came out and asked me to come in. I did not know his name. I have to this day never been told his name. He sat behind a desk that was almost entirely empty. He gestured to a chair. I sat. I gave him the envelope. I told him in plain language what I had found, what I had seen, and what I believed it meant. I spoke for about 11 minutes. He did not interrupt me once. He did not write anything down. He looked at me with the same steady, unreadable expression the whole time, like a man listening to a weather report he had been expecting. When I was finished, he said, "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." That was all he said. I stood up, I left the office, I went home, I slept for the first time in 3 weeks. I do not know exactly what happened in the days that followed. I was not told, I did not ask. I know that I was not assigned to the records corridor for the following week. I was put on a rotation at the South Gate, which is a posting normally given to guards in their first year. I understood this was not a punishment, it was a precaution. They were moving me out of the corridor while they did whatever they needed to do. I know that on the 4th day of that week, the smell of lemon polish in the records corridor was reportedly very strong. A colleague of mine, Peter Holloway, mentioned it offhand at the staff canteen, the way men mention the weather. He said the cleaners had been through twice. He said the cabinets looked different. Some had been moved, some had been opened, some had been emptied. He didn't know why. He shrugged, he drank his tea. I know that on the 6th day, Director Hugh Bramwell did not come to work. Nor on the 7th, nor on the 8th. By the 2nd week, his name was no longer on the door of his office. There was no announcement, there was no notice in any internal memo. He was simply, quietly, no longer there. His office was given to a new director within a fortnight, a woman from the cabinet office whose name I will not write here because she has not given me permission to. She nodded to me once in the corridor on her 3rd day. I nodded back. That was the extent of it. I know that 2 weeks after I had handed over the envelope, the same quiet man from the dark suit called me into his office again. He thanked me a second time. He asked if I had spoken to anyone about what I had found. I told him I had not. He nodded. He said, "It would be best if it stayed that way." I said, "Of course, sir." He said, "You will not be called to give evidence. There would be no proceedings of the kind you might be imagining. The matter has been resolved internally. The princess has not been informed. The king has been informed only of the outcome, not of the details." "Your name does not appear in any document," I said. "I understand, sir," he said. "Do you want it too?" I thought about that for a moment. I thought about what it would mean to be the man who had caught the man, to have my name attached to it, to be thanked formally, to be promoted perhaps, or moved to a more visible post. I thought about it honestly. Then I said, "No, sir. I'd rather it didn't." He looked at me for a long moment with that same unreadable face, and then for the first time in either of our 2 meetings he smiled, just slightly, just at one corner of his mouth. He said, "I thought you might say that, Mr. Ashford." I left his office. I went back to my post. I returned to the records corridor the following Monday. It looked the same. The lamps still flickered if you closed the door too hard. The cabinets still stood in their long, quiet rows. The duty desk still had the same scratch on its corner where someone, years before my time, had dragged a chair too hard against it. But the smell was different. The lemon polish was gentler, lighter. It no longer stung the back of the throat the way it had during those weeks. I noticed it the first night, and I noticed it every night after. I do not know if the cleaners had changed their brand, or if it was simply that I no longer carried a knot in my chest every time I walked the corridor. Probably both, probably mostly the second. Peter Holloway and I worked the same rotation for a while after that. He never asked me where I had been the week I was at the South Gate. He never asked me about Bramwell. I think he knew not to. Peter is a quiet man. There are many of us in this work. I went back to my routine. I filed the night's summary reports. I stacked them. I logged them. I slid them into the cabinet. I signed the corner of the duty book. I moved on, but I read every department header now. I read every signature line. I read them slowly, with my finger under the words, the way a child reads. I have done this every night for the years since, not because I expect to find another wrong name, not because I think there will be another Hugh Bramwell, but because I learned in those weeks that this is the work. The work is not the patrol, the work is not the radio. The work is not the boots and the uniform and the standing at the door. The work is the reading. The smallest details protect the biggest people. A signature in the wrong place. A department name that should not be there. That is where loyalty actually lives, not in the loud moments. Not in the ceremonial ones, in the quiet ones in the corridor at 2 in the morning with no one watching. I have never met Princess Catherine. I have never been in a room with her. I do not know if she was ever told that there was for 8 months. A senior man in her own household photographing her private schedule and slipping reports about her into the wrong files under the wrong names. I suspect she was not told. I think it is better that way. A person should not have to carry every shadow that passes near them. That is what the rest of us are here for. I still walk the records corridor every morning before my shift ends. I walk it slowly, from one end to the other. I check the vault door, I check the cabinets, I check the duty desk, I check the lamps, and then I go home and I sleep, and the next night I come back and I do it again. A kingdom is not held up by the men in the photographs. It is held up by the men in the corridors. Quiet, ordinary, watchful, the kind of men whose names nobody knows and who would prefer it that way. My name is Thomas Ashford. I have served as a royal guard for 14 years, and every morning on my way out I still check.